Hello, this is the process. My name is Dr. John Bush. Lesson 134, consistency of the median, looking at wide receivers here, finishing up my positional analysis here. We've done quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends last lesson, and now wide receivers. Go back to lesson 128 to begin the process. Thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out at the fantasy football uh, .com website. Science of Fantasy, I guess. Science of Fantasy Football. And then we have a podcast and all sorts of goodies there for your success. And the whole point of this is to see is consistency in a weekly way. Is it predictable? And can we use it for the 2022 season? In other words, can we use what happened in 2021 for wide receivers and use that to help us in 2022? Okay. So go back to the beginning, see where we ended up here at this point. We're using statistical analysis to establish whether any differences in groups are random or real, and how can we use this for our prediction purposes for 2022. Okay, so I'll assume you've seen all the other lessons and we're rocking and rolling with the wide receivers. And here we go. This is three data groups of the so-called COM-scores consisting of the median. I do it in percentile. 100% weekly consistency would be the best you can have. Of course, the worst would be 0 here. And so I divided wide receivers who were greater than 35% COM-scores last year, 34 to 15 or less than 15, so 14 or so below, and asked the question the next year, did what they did the previous year mean anything? Was there a difference? So I gathered their last year data. So I started in 2014, and what you see is the actual data that resulted from that collection, and you can see there definitely is some differences, I think, but we will get into that. And the first thing that we've done in the preceding lessons, we look at the populations. This is 2014-21, last year's wide receiver comp fantasy point tiers, the high, the mid, and the low. So that's green, blue, and red boxes. And this is the box and whisker. And the whiskers are the little lines going up, and that shows the range of the population. And you can see that the populations do look different. The boxes are different sizes and positions relative to the COM-score averages there. So it's suspicious that something's going on. 66% of the population data from that time point is in the boxes, and 99% is in the whiskers. So we pretty much, and there's a couple outliers, but pretty much you capture all the population there in the high, the mid, and the low from last year. And so we're going to test, is this difference real or is it random? Okay. I mean, in your statistical analysis, you always have to be worried that, what you think you see is just not real, right? At one point, is it possible to flip, heads 10 times in a row? It actually is possible. But after a while, if you go 20 times and it's all heads, you start thinking, oh, it's a two-headed coin or something's not right. But same thing here. You use statistics to try to determine, is that real, what we think we see, or is it random and not real? It's very important to get a handle on reality when we're using stats to guide us in this fantasy football arena here. So here's the populations, the high, the medium, the middle, and the low. So the next thing is we use a test called the ANOVA test, analysis of variance. And you look at the variation in the different groups there. In this case, it was 3, high, mid, and low. And we asked the question, is the variation different or not? And if it is different, then that means there's probably differences when you compare these different groups. Doesn't tell you which comparisons the ANOVA doesn't, but it tells you there's at least one difference. And the key stat here is the mean COM average, and you multiply it by 100, and that's the percentile. So it's 35%, 26% mid last year, 19% low last year. So it's clear that if you were high and consistent last year, you tended to produce higher than mid or low. Okay, is that real? Are those means real? Can we use that to make predictions for 2022? The prediction would be, if I'm looking for high-powered wide receivers, I probably want to stay in the high group that were high in 2021. I probably don't want to venture off, certainly into the low group here. I understand we can't measure rookies right now, but everything has limitations, and that is that. So we continue and ask the question, is there a difference? Are these differences here, the mean, is this really real, or is this just random? It's like we can just, there's no predictability to any of this consistency data in a weekly way. The ANOVA is called the p-value. It's called the F statistic. That p-value, is this random? The chance is 3.4 times 10 to the minus 15. So no, it is not random, it's real. And so that is good for us. That means it is useful for predictability for the 2022. And then we have to use another statistical test to actually compare each group to each other after the ANOVA says there's at least one difference, and that's the Tukey's, Dr. Tukey, highest significant difference result. And if you see green here, that means the chance of being random is almost none. Okay, less than 1%, so we assume it's none. And so high versus mid, high and low are completely different, as we saw the means, and mid to low is different as well. So we can hang our hat on that. So in real terms, what does that look like if we look at past data? So what we see here is wide receiver players that were in 2020, the high, versus what they turned down in 2021. So we use 2020 data to predict 2021, and I colorize the ones that stayed high, and you can see 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 8 high, Ridley, IU, Metcalf, that, what is that, 5, 6 mid, and 3 that were bust. And Robinson, Schuster, and then they were like 0. They didn't do anything. So that was very sad. People talking about Juju, just be aware. He can be a little funky. So the wide receivers, was it 5, 6, 7, 8? So not as good as I would like, but it is still predictable, but there's a lot more looseness to that than I've seen. So believe it or not, the running backs turned out to have the highest uh, return value from year to year. I thought that was very intriguing if you look at that lesson. Tight ends were a little better, a little worse, and the wide receivers a little bit loose here. But you end up still having a good shot at getting a higher, at least a medium producer, and a fail rate is, you're hoping not going to happen. But there it is. That's the actual data. Stats say there is a difference. It's just not as, sometimes, we want it all, right? We want it all or none, and it's rarely all or none in the statistic land. Sorry. If it was all or none, then everybody'd be winning leagues. So we now look at 2021. I grouped all the wide receivers based on what they did last year as far as weekly consistencies, the com scores. And if you look at the high players here, a lot of these are the usual suspects that are high. But people like Godwin, because of his injury, he was hitting on all cylinders for his injury. So if he can come back, he might be a bargain. Thielen's low this year. I don't know what they're seeing, but looks good to me. It doesn't mean you pick him first, but it does mean that, he could be a good bargain for you later in the draft. Uh, Antonio Brown, when he gets on a team and stays okay, then he can deliver, but you never know. Sterling Shepard, he's laid way deep, but when he was playing, he was on point, folks. Renfro people know. Let's see who else is. I think the rest of them are pretty much known. So those are some of the ones that may be under the radar that could be worth our time. Then the mid players, so it's kind of like the three giant tiers here if we're looking for 2022 here. But anyway, this can give you at least a beginning to where you want to fish a little bit. So if one of these high folks is in compared to one of the mid-tier folks, I would, I'd be looking hard to pick the high com players from last year and trying to figure out, why I'm not doing that if I am going against that. So there's the predictability. You can look and see what's what and see does some of this make sense or not. I don't know. There's some like here's Gabriel Davis. He was not consistent at all. People are anticipating something. Be aware that, this is the data. I'm not saying he won't be, but what this data says is that would be a rarity in this group. So, not everybody in this group is a super sleeper by any means. There was some, low consistency players in here. So be cautious when you're drafting, especially late here, and you're kind of stuck in this tier here. I think I'd do some serious research if I have to try to parse them out. But again, right now, looking at top down, we at least get them into three pots for us to consider who and what to draft here. So that's the data. It is what it is. I've got some more lessons in this whole world coming, and I'm going to do some ADP comparisons, overlays and underlays coming. So let's follow up on some of that. I hadn't made all the figures yet, but I will, and we'll have that to finish up consistency, weekly consistency, using the median here. It's a little bit different than people are used to. Okay, this is Dr. Bush for The Process. Thanks for listening. Hang around at our website. Lots of good stuff, a lot of goodies, a lot of things, fun stuff happening. Woo woo. Let's crush this year.